Tara, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Hi, thanks, Ashu. Good, good.
You know,
Excited to have.
same here, right? This is an important and exciting session, right? I think with what you're doing at Bidano, right, where you're solving for supply chain in healthcare, which is I think all of us have realized the importance of healthcare. I think it was a sector that we knew, which we always knew it was important, right? I think, but the last 1.5 years has kind of really changed how we look at healthcare, right? And that
Yeah.
across stakeholder group, right? I think
Yes,
each one of
yes.
us has become very serious, right, as consumers, and I think so is the infrastructure players, right? They become extremely serious, right? And I think the good part is that a lot of technology has been adopted through the course, right? And I think that's
That's very
essentially where you
important.
are. You're sitting somewhere in the
Yeah.
middle, right? You're helping them get access to supplies much faster, much clearer, right? They can plan ahead, and then so many other things, right? Thus, it becomes
Mm-hmm.
an important conversation, becomes an exciting conversation,
Yeah.
right? In and with a renewed understanding, respect, energy with which we want to kind of approach healthcare as an industry, right? With that,
Yeah.
Tala, I'd love you to take us through a quick round of introduction, and I think
Sure.
then we dive into the session for the day.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashu. It's excited to be here and looking forward to some exciting conversations or also learning something. So I'll just start with a quick introduction.
Sure.
And just to address your earlier point, I mean, we just got lucky in the process, and we are also like glad that we were building before COVID. We are building something that would definitely be helpful in these type of difficult situations.
Right.
So yeah, that is said and done. Now, in terms of my personal introduction, Ashu, I am coming from a very like a modest family background.
Hmm.
Nobody in my family was a businessman or an entrepreneur. Right,
Right.
everybody was into a service industry. So
Right.
personally, we have a family business of healthcare. So where we own a couple of multi-speciality hospitals, chain
Right.
of diagnostic centers across various cities in Maharashtra, only
Right.
Bombay, Pune, Nasik,
Right.
etc. So being born and brought up in this ecosystem, I've seen a lot of people suffering into the entire supply
Right.
chain process. When you talk about the primary healthcare, the secondary healthcare, the tertiary healthcare, right? Due to lack of technology penetration, it was really difficult for people to get the proper access to the healthcare.
Right.
So always had this thought of addressing this problem, right, in the long
Right.
run. So and after that, I mean, just living with that thought for 15-20 years since my childhood, and then
Right.
got into an engineering background,
Right.
engineering this thing, and just completed my BE from Pune, SIT Pune.
Right.
Post that, a typical corporate life, joined Cognizant, was working with JP Morgan and a couple of other clients on the fintech side
Right.
as a software developer. Like I was a pure techie.
Right.
Then always had this entrepreneurial spirit of building something for the society.
Right.
And that's when, I mean, I connected the dots, what I always wanted to do, right, into the
Interesting.
startup space. Yeah. So had gained a fair understanding of technology, the product, and the engineering piece of it. And then that was the actual gap in the entire B2B healthcare space. I mean, that time I was not really focusing on B2B or B2C because I didn't even know all these things.
Right.
Not an MBA, of course, so didn't have any understanding of all these terminologies, the business plans, etc., etc. So it was all that I learned in the process. So
Right.
that time I was just thinking of building a technology platform for the consumers to get a proper access to the healthcare.
Right.
And this was back in 2014 when I passed out. I joined Cognizant, was working in Chennai, for over 1 year. I didn't know what I was doing, but yeah, it
Right.
was just days were passing by. And at the end of the day, I was like literally cursing myself. "Ki, what the hell am I doing? Right? I'm wasting the precious time of my life and
Right.
not building something which will be useful to the people around me." So then quit my job, decided to sort of pursue my own journey and build something that will excite me at the end of the day and also add
Right.
value to the society. So started my own tech service startup where I actually wanted to gain some experience into
Right.
the entire end-to-end product development and the delivery piece of it, and also wanted to get some people along with me in the journey.
Right.
So with my college friend, we both started this company where we were building enterprise applications for a couple of enterprise clients based out of US and UK. That
Right.
this was back in 2015, early 2015. I was in Hong Kong at that time. I had two major clients, one in UK and one in US, mainly
Right.
on a healthcare and fintech side. So these two were the major verticals that has always been the core of my interest areas and all. So did it for around 1.5 year. We built the products, we delivered it. That time I had a small team of around 30-35 plus people
Right.
working on it, different cities in India, mostly remote. For sold that product, to both of these clients. And then at that time I realized like I had enough confidence, because being just 22 24, passing out of college, and trying to build something that will actually having an impact on the entire ecosystem, or you're going to be challenging the most traditional ways of running the business or doing the business, it's gonna be, it's scary, right? And
Right.
unless and until you have that commitment or a passion to sort of work on it, or face people with your new age solution, right, it doesn't really give you that confidence to sort of start.
Right.
So I had gained that confidence, some basic understanding of the business deliverables, building the products, building the teams, managing the financials, because I had this thing very clear since my day one when I started my entrepreneurial journey, was that initially I'll have to manage everything.
Right.
The things which I was not good at all, finances, all this compliances piece, right? Even the operations, because coming from a technology background, I never had any understanding of the operations and all. But
Right.
I thought like I'll have to do it initially, because otherwise it would be very difficult for me to understand it at scale.
I
So
agree.
made up my mindset, and back in 2016, early 2016, I came back to India, sold that company to my co-founder, who was like my friend, and
Right.
raised some capital from that, because I had a clear mindset that I will not be raising an external capital unless and until we have a product market fit.
Right.
So came back to India and Pune. That time my family was in Pune. So
Right.
came back here. During that time, I was just looking out for a co-founder who would
Right.
be excited to sort of help us, or maybe build this entire solution with me.
Right.
So I met Ashok through a common friend. Ashok Yadav is the co-founder of Bidano. So we both met through a common friend in an event where we sort of, just brainstormed our ideas, and we had
Right.
found a very strong synergies and complementary skill set and experiences, right? So then we gelled up pretty well. We deliberated and we contemplated the overall idea and the plan for over 6 months. And then we incorporated Bidano back in November 16 as a company which will aggregate the local pharmacies to help the consumers get the medicines delivered in less than 1 hour, and
Interesting.
that too with a flat 15% discount on the ethical products. They call it the
Right.
standard drugs, and on the generic drugs, consumer could get up to 60 to 70% discount on the prescription orders.
Right.
So the ultimate problem that we wanted to solve, right, with Bidano, was the problem of availability and accessibility of the medicine.
Right.
So with that thought process, we incorporated Bidano, and that's how the journey began.
Right. Tara, thanks for that introduction, right? I think that was very helpful, right? That just gives us a sense in terms of, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think that maturity is something which is very important, right? And unless you are there, right, I think it's very difficult to, pull off something that you want to do for next 5, 7, 8 years, right? And I think India
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
market which is large enough where you require that kind of energy, right?
exactly.
Tara, what I would love you to sort of give us a perspective on, right, is how large is this market, right? Because there are a lot of reports, there is a lot of data which is available in the public domain, right? But when you start looking at it, when you start closely working, right, you know, uh, there are just too many complexities around that data, right? A macro data is so much more easier to pull off, right? That this is the trade happening, so and so forth, right? But there is a very large percentage of trade which is happening in unorganized format, right? Which is happening in cash, not documented, right? How large is this industry, right? I mean, give us a sense of that, right? The other thing is, which I would love to understand, is where have you reached in your journey, right? In this product, where have
Sure.
you gotten to? How many partners do you have? What are the key brands that you're doing, for example, right? How many say primary healthcare or tertiary healthcare players are you supporting, right? Where is Bidano in its journey today?
Yeah, sure. So let me tell you, I mean, the story. I mean, when we actually got to know the size of the market,
Sure.
right? Because both me and Ashok, we were coming from the background where we did not have any understanding of the startup. So we both
Right.
are first time entrepreneurs, right? So never done a research on the
Right.
TAM or a SAM, right? Or maybe the product GTMs and
Right.
all. So we just had the idea, and we decided to build the product and just go out there and execute it, and then
Right.
learn in the process. So we did not have an understanding of how big the market would be.
Right.
But I'll tell you a very interesting story. I mean, when actually we got to know how big is the size of the market,
Right.
because our intention was not to raise funds. So anyway, I mean, we never encountered this question from the investors, how big the TAM is. So we
Right.
started our platform back in like early 2017. It was a B2C platform where we were fulfilling the prescription orders by aggregating the local pharmacies online. So back then you could just relate us with maybe Swiggy or Zomato on the
Right.
medicine side of it, right? So where people can just upload the prescription and prescription will be routed to the nearby pharmacist and they will just pack the order, and then my guy would be delivering the order to the consumer.
Right.
So the exciting learning, I mean, the very interesting learning that we had was when we launched a platform, right? And it was really need of the hour for the pharmacy, because these e-pharmacies were really disrupting the entire ecosystem with deep discounting model at that time. But when we did a survey, right, and understood that more than 95%, at that time it was 97% of the market share, was still with these traditional brick and mortar shops, like the fulfillment of the medicines was happening through these local pharmacies. So we had two options. Either we could sort of build a traditional model of inventory based supply chain, or we can have an aggregator model where we aggregate the local pharmacy and decentralize your inventory infrastructure across all the pharmacies in the city or the country. So we decided to take the path where the actual market share was, and we knew, like coming from the healthcare background, I knew the pull or the demand actually is being generated not from the pharmacy or any other channel, but from the doctors, right? So doctors are writing the prescription and doctor is going to advise you, like you buy it from the nearby pharmacy or you buy it from this XYZ place. And most of the doctors in our country are also suggesting people to, whenever they are done with their buying, just come and show me the medicine, so that, you know, they make sure that, you know, people are buying from the nearby pharmacy and he's getting the commission out of it. So it's a very difficult ecosystem to be in. Like I myself, I mean, you know, we have a lot of doctors in my family, so I understand what is going on. So it's not really good for the people, because somehow, you know, the healthcare access becomes a bit expensive, and there are a lot of inefficiencies in the entire process that was actually, you know, resulting to the cost of increasing healthcare for the end consumer. So when we started our platform, we started giving orders to the nearby pharmacies. These pharmacies were not organized. They were not having inventory management systems to track the inventories of individual products. So most of the time, I mean, when the volumes on our platform went up, because people were getting flat 15% discount, up to 60% discount if there is generic medicine. So, and we were just pitching out on this initiative of empowerment of the local pharmacies, rather than, you know, disruption of these brick and mortar shops. So we were encouraging people to buy local back in 2017. And everybody was pretty excited, because the delivery turnaround time was like 35 minutes when you're getting your medicines. At that time, Netmeds used to take 2 to 3 days to deliver the drugs. And there was a platform called Myra who used to take 24 hours to deliver the drugs. And our model was like Swiggy model. Aap dekho, order dalo aur 35 minutes, 30 minutes ke andar medicine mil gaya. So volumes went up significantly. We were not ready in the back end. We did not have our supply chain sorted. We didn't have technology platform to sort of predict the demand and supply so that we can communicate to our partners. So what our partners used to do, I mean, we got to know about B2B supply chain with the execution of our first model. So later on, we have pivoted the model completely. But these pharmacies, when they started running out of stock, no, we have asked them why you're not able to deliver the medicine on time. Our fill rate was going down, the delivery turnaround time was going up. So they told us that every day we buy the products from 10 to 15 different distributors in the market.
Interesting.
Right? Because of different brands. मैं बोला यार 10-15 से क्यों बाय कर रहे हो, किसी एक से बाय करो, वॉल्यूम ऑर्डर मिलेगा and you'll get the delivery faster and you'll be able to fulfill my order faster. So they said, no sir, there are 200,000 SKUs in pharma. And in Pune, I mean, we started with Pune, so I'll just give you the example and then I'll extrapolate the number. We are currently there in 10 cities, so I can tell you the overall numbers. In Pune, we have over 7,000 pharmacies and 400 distributors delivering over 200,000 SKUs to these 7,000 pharmacies. I'm talking about only pharma, huh? And then there is OTC category, there is surgical, there is FMCG. Combining all of these together, they have 20 to 30, 40,000 SKUs altogether combining. So 250,000 SKUs being delivered to these pharmacies on a daily basis from 400 distributors only in one city. Bombay, multiply the number by 4. Delhi, multiply by the number by 3. So just to give you the perspective, India has over 1 million pharmacies. Each of these pharmacies are procuring from 10 to 15 different distributors on a daily basis. So there are more than 10 to 15 million orders which are being processed only in B2B supply chain. The average ticket size per order on our platform since last couple of years is on an average $20. So around 1,500 to 1,800 rupees. So we are talking about over $64 billion market. That is only B2B pharma supply chain.
Interesting.
And we got to know about this number not from any market research report or
Right.
anything,
Right.
any fancy stuff, but we just took a bottoms up approach. We started doing the
Right.
business. We had some setbacks, we had some learnings, we
Right.
interacted with the stakeholders, and we got this data from those guys.
Interesting.
So that time we realized, man, what the hell? I mean,
Right.
this is like a huge market we are targeting. We can't just go out there and just execute on the solution unless and until we have the backend sorted.
Right.
So then we have later on decided, when we started talking to the distributors who are supplying the products to the pharmacies, and
Right.
they have highlighted a different level of problems altogether. We started talking to the brands. We started understanding their supply chain processes. So later on, in like early 2018, we realized scaling up a B2C platform, which is like a pharmacy aggregator platform, without B2B supply chain organized enough to deliver the product to these pharmacies in couple of hours, we can't scale up.
Right.
So we have put that entire platform on hold, the B2C, and we have pivoted our model completely on a B2B
Interesting.
side.
Interesting. What's the what are the current numbers like, right? I mean, you said you'd kind of mentioned, right? You alluded to it that
Yes.
you're in about 10 cities right now. So how many cities, how many pharmacies, right? How many distributors, how many brands, right? Where are you right
Yeah, we have currently close to 30,000 pharmacies on our platform across 10 cities.
Right.
And we are processing close to 3 lakh orders on a monthly basis.
Right.
So we started with a couple of hundred pharmacies, 1,000, 2,000 orders
Right.
type of a number. But when we have pivoted the model on a B2B side, we saw a huge opportunity. Most of the platform, I mean, most of these stakeholders,
Right.
were being approached by a lot of companies, a lot of startups
Sure.
operating in this space, but they were all positioning themselves on a SaaS side, or a
Right.
side where it will help the distributor to generate the demand.
Right.
Right. So there were companies like PharmaRack, Retailio. I don't usually take the names, but yes, there are a lot of competitors that Bidano had. But
Sure.
their positioning was completely on a demand generation side or a pharma SaaS side.
Right.
So we did some study, we did research, and we got to know that market. I'm talking about back in 2018 when
Sure.
we have pivoted. At that time, this B2B for the pharma market was growing at 15% CAGR.
Right.
And more than 95% of the market share was with these brick and mortar shops or the traditional distributors.
Right.
So if you understand, one distributor, a local distributor earlier was catering to maybe 100 pharmacies a day. Currently, he will be catering to over 150 pharmacies, and it's all organic. They are not
Right.
doing anything on a marketing or a customer acquisition front. So the
Right.
business was growing by natural means for him, right? He was not facing any issue with the business growth, because companies are having their MRs who are generating the demand, doctors are writing the prescriptions on. So it was all like an organic growth for him, but he was facing the problems on the fulfillment side of the order. And there was no company who was focusing on organizing this fulfillment infrastructure to
Right.
all of these stakeholders. And that was the need of the hour. So we have consciously taken up this decision that Bidano will position itself on the fulfillment side of the healthcare delivery, not on the demand generation, because we had anticipated this thing, that going forward with the deeper penetration of the technology into the ecosystem, when the comfort and convenience of the people will change, and considering the size of the market, where we are dealing with more than 250,000 SKUs combining all the categories,
Right.
it would be very difficult for individual company with the inventory led model to cater to the demands of these million pharmacies. So the market share of these traditional distributors is not going to get impacted. But what is going to be the need of the hour is the fulfillment platform, which will help them fulfill the demand that is being generated by through all the other sources.
Interesting. Tala, will it be fair to call you a distributor-focused platform or a player, right? Essentially, while of course you're sitting in the middle of each of these parties, right, and critical stakeholders, is it a fair understanding to call you a distributor-first company?
No,
or do you think your role is kind of evolved, right? From
yes.
where you possibly started as a distributor-focused company, right? Because that's a critical stack. They're dealing with so many players. There's lack of data understanding, right? I mean, it's all hunch-driven, right? Until you came in, until a bunch of other players came in, right? But now you have access to data on both the sides of it, right? So you have access to pharmacy data in terms of what their consumption is, what their repeat is, possibly, and then you help distributors plan better, right? And of course, in turn, you help brands get a better understanding in terms of what is happening, what is moving where is the requirement, right? Possibly a reflection of certain trends as well, right? Is that a fair understanding, right?
Exactly.
Or how do you sort of how do you envision it in your in your scheme of things?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, you were bang on the point. So we started with something, right? And
Right.
as the typical journey of a startup, when we started scratching the surface of the iceberg, we got to know there are just n number of opportunities in this
Right.
space, and the space is so unorganized and fragmented that if you look at a traditional distributor, how does he manage his day-to-day operations or the business,
Right.
right? It was literally scary when we have visited our first distributor and understood his entire distribution process.
Right.
So they are still using the ERP system which were developed in 1980s, right, on
Right.
DPF formats. Yeah,
Right.
literally they उनका एंटर बटन जो रहता है ना बॉस, वो रब हो गया है, पूरा मिट गया है, इतने बार खट 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 दबाता है.
Right.
Why are you pressing this button 4 times? It can
Right.
be done in one click. So they are saying no, हमारा ये screen है, इसमें 4 बार करके बाद एक बिल पंच होता है. So from the technology standpoint, so
Right.
we have identified a couple of opportunities when we have
Right.
just pivoted our model on the B2B side.
Right.
So there were 3 major opportunities or 3 major verticals where there was a huge gap in the B2B supply chain. First was, as I highlighted, the fulfillment piece of it, like the entire logistics, the reverse logistics, the distribution, the packing, and like all this entire distribution space. Second was the demand generation, but a full stack demand generation. You can say one-stop shop for the pharmacy for all of his procurement, because till date, I mean, till date before Bidano, most of these pharmacies have highlighted, right? They're buying stocks from multiple distributors in the market.
Right.
And they had lack of visibility on the pricing, on the availability, on the credits, right, on the schemes.
Right.
So there was this lack of transparency, because of which they were procuring expensive.
Absolutely.
And ultimately the cost for the end consumer used to be high.
Right.
So the second opportunity was bringing in transparency in the entire procurement process and making the lives of the pharmacies easier by giving them one platform on which they can do 100% of their procurement. That was the second opportunity. The third was on the fintech side.
Right.
So the entire B2B pharma market works on credit.
Right.
And typically this credit line ranges from 15 days to goes up to like 2 to 3 months in case of hospitals or large hospitals and labs. Right. So fintech was the third largest opportunity that we had identified.
Right.
But at that time we were a pretty early stage startup, limited resources, a team of 5-10 bunch of crazy entrepreneurs are, trying to do something crazy. So we had a laser focus on what is the need of the hour. First, let's do that. So we built this infrastructure to deliver anything and everything to the pharmacy in less than 3 hours within a city. The fulfillment infrastructure was built. The network of distributors and network of pharmacies we had on our platform. So with the network effect, we were just growing like anything. So in terms of the fulfillment infrastructure, as I said, like we are currently present across multiple cities. So it just happened over the span of last 15-18 months, from 1 city to 10 city, from 10,000 orders to 3 lakh orders, like couple of lakhs in GMV to maybe couple of $1 million in GMV.
Interesting.
So like that. So with that platform we started, and then we have timed up product launches in different phases. So first year down the line, we'll only be doing the fulfillment thing, build a network of pharmacies, have the stakeholders on your platform, make them interact with each other, and build the supply chain network. Once you have that, then you launch your e-commerce platform where you also help pharmacies procure everything from these distributors and get it delivered through your existing fulfillment infrastructure within a couple of hours.
Interesting.
That was the first launch. That was the second launch. The third launch, once you have the buying patterns of the pharmacies and the selling patterns of the distributors, the volumes, the SKU data and everything, then you start helping them with the credit options or the invoice discounting options. So for this fintech, we have tied up with a lot of large NBFCs like BharatPe, M-Swipe, ePayLater, DigiSpesh. All these guys are on board on our platform, and we are giving these pharmacies an exclusive credit services through Bidano's and its NBFC partners.
Interesting.
So we have evolved from just a fulfillment platform for the pharmacy to a full stack technology platform for the pharmacy.
Very interesting.
Which is helping them not only for the distribution piece of it, but also with the procurement, also with the fintech, like the credit options, also with the logistics, the expiry management. And now we are moving one step ahead, where we are now targeting brands and super stockists and CNF agents as our stakeholders, so that we will be able to organize the entire pharma distribution right from manufacturer till the end consumer. So we are coming up with a very, very interesting platform as early as January or February next year.
Interesting.
So our beta launch is coming up in February. That platform will revolutionize the entire Indian healthcare ecosystem. I'm quite confident on it. And the interest that we have, so we already have some early adopters. We have already entered into some agreements with a lot of chemist associations for this platform. But this is going to be revolutionary. I mean, people will get to experience the entire healthcare delivery like they have never done before, and it is going to be so seamless that they will not have to do anything. They'll just have to just go visit the doctor, go to their homes, sit back, relax while their medicines will reach their doorsteps in just a couple of hours time. Whether it is available with the local pharmacy or not, whether it is available in your city or not, it will be delivered because it has to be delivered.
That's phenomenal, right? And that's overwhelming, right? I mean, I think there's nothing which is more impressive to me than the aspiration of a founder, right? And I think that's clearly visible in this interaction, right? And it's exciting at the same time, right? That we are in this discussion, right? And you wanting to sort of revamp the whole space, right? But now that automatically brings me to a question, right? Which is also an important question, right? When you look at medical business, right, or when you look at healthcare in general, right? Each stakeholder comes with a certain sense of resistance, right? And that resistance is something which has been a very core part of it, right? And that's the reason, not that technology was not there, right? The technology was always there, right? Somebody or the other was kind of creating the technology, right? Unfortunately, what happened was, because of the resistance, there's like a pushback, right? Because there were silos that existed that didn't want that transparency to come in, right? What you're enabling and empowering is transparency in the process, right? Yeah. What's been your experience, right? I mean, there is a lot of bureaucracy in the process, right? How have you been able to sort of deal with it, right? Has onboarding become easier today? All the challenges still exist, right? As you, for example, now expand from, say, urban markets into, say, the tier 2 markets, tier 3 markets, right? Do you think those are inefficiencies that still exist? Mindset still is a problem. What are some of the other challenges, right? That you think are kind of critical to be dealt with, right? And will possibly take some time. What's your sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, very, very good question, man. I mean, I'm quite excited to share my experience on this point because it was not very easy. When we have pivoted the model to B2B, right? My job, I was heading the business development piece of it while Ashok was focusing on the finance and operations bit of it. So to onboard our first distributor, I literally had to, visit him more than 31 times.
Right.
I was kicked out from his cabin a couple of times.
Right.
He was literally shouting on me. In a layman's language, कि यार ये 25 साल का लौंडा है, मैं बिजनेस में 25 साल से हूँ, आके मुझे सिखा रहा है कि ये होना चाहिए कुछ, इसका टेक मेरा ये कर देगा, इसका टेक मेरा वो कर देगा, इसका प्रोसेस मेरा ये कर देगा, एंड देन देयर इज दिस कंपनी कॉल्ड नेटमेट्स जो आके मेरा 40 साल पुराना धंधे को खा जाएगा, ये करेगा. Like you understand this traditional mindset, na?
Right.
So the one thing which actually helped us a lot was a persistence. Right. I mean, if you want to do something, if you want to do it badly, so bad that you don't think about any other alternatives or giving up options or anything of that sort, that's when you will this thing, if it is visible to the someone who is sitting across the table, right, people will give you the chance. And a lot of startups, even before Bidano, I know the names, I've heard their names from my customers. They told me, यार तेरे पहले बहुत आए और बहुत गए, right? हम लोग किसी को घुसने नहीं देते इसके अंदर, ये हमारा एसोसिएशन है और ये है और वो है और ये होता है और वो होता है, एंड वी हैव सीन कोई कुछ नहीं कर पाता और हमारे पास एक्सक्लूसिविटी है और हमारे पास ये है वो. But I told them one thing which is like very simple. मैंने बोला, sir, you must have been approached by a lot of other startups or a lot of other companies. They were doing pretty well in their own spaces, but I don't know what the positioning was, right? What Bidano is trying to do here is Bidano is positioning itself on the sides of the retailers and distributors. Right. Though we are a tech-enabled company, we are a technology-first company, but we are not on the other side. So they every time you talk about a tech platform with any of these traditional players, they'll start comparing you with companies like Netmeds, PharmEasy, who are just trying to disrupt the entire ecosystem. Right. So it becomes very difficult for them to understand कि यार ये tech मतलब सिर्फ वो tech नहीं होता है.
Correct.
B2C e-commerce नहीं होता.
Right.
टेक मतलब ये प्रोसेस ओरिएंटेड टेक भी हो सकता है, टेक
Right.
मतलब ये B2B टेक भी हो सकता है जो मेरा काम आसान करेगा. So
Right.
it was that moment for me when I have made them understand this thing very clearly. Sir, what I am doing here is I am giving up everything. So I literally had to tell them my own personal story, that
Right.
what I was doing earlier. I
Hmm.
had a tech company. I was sitting somewhere, working with a highly professional people, making enough money to, satisfy myself at the end of the day. I've given everything up because I see there is a problem, and
Right.
our stakeholders like retailers and distributors are going to be facing some challenges going forward if they don't
Right.
adapt to the technology platform. So what I'm doing here is I'm here to help you. So let me try
Interesting.
to help you. Right.
Right.
And I told them, sir, we are trying to empower distributors and retailers with the
Right.
help of technology. We want to give them a competitive edge so that going forward, they would also be able to provide a better comfort and convenience to the end consumer as
Right.
compared to all the other competitors that you might have in future.
Right.
So after literally like 31 visits, that guy gave me an
Right.
opportunity to try out my model with 10% of his business. He just
Right.
gave me 100 orders. He used to do 1,000 orders on a daily basis. He just gave me 100 orders. I had to go and do the deliveries along with a couple of delivery boys just to show him the commitment,
Right.
right? And the
Interesting.
passion to build this.
Interesting.
And that guy, I mean, he's still a customer of Bedano, right?
Right.
He now he's telling our story to everybody out there in the market.
Right.
So if you have a passion, right, and if you are very clear with your thought process, and we were very clear since day one, like in terms of our vision, we didn't want to undercut anybody from the supply chain,
Right.
right? We work with very small margin percentages, but it's a volume game. And
Right.
going forward, as you evolve yourself, you start addressing the problems of the entire value chain, your margins will go up definitely.
Right.
But earlier we were working with just 1 or 2% margin in the entire transaction.
Right.
So we knew key investors would not be happy with it,
Mm-hmm.
but we just need one investor to say yes.
Right.
And we have like hundreds of investors, and if we are committed towards whatever we are trying to do going forward, if people or the stakeholders will see value in our vision, they will partner up. And that's what has happened. We have told
Right.
them we are not going to undercut you, we are not going to bypass any stakeholder in the supply chain just because of the interest of additional couple of percent margin.
Right.
But what we are trying to do, we are going to simplify the technology, we are
Mm-hmm.
going to organize the processes, and we are going to eliminate the inefficiency and make money out of it.
Interesting.
While all
Interesting.
the other competitors, I mean,
Right.
what they have done is they
Tala.
have took advantage
Right.
of their situations, and they started, manipulating the data and
Right.
selling the data, and then ultimately it was hurting the stakeholders, and that's where the skepticism was coming from. So it
Right.
was very difficult for us, but somehow we managed to crack it
Interesting.
and managed to establish the
You
credibility.
know, Tala, I would want to dig further on that particular point, right? I think it's an important point that you kind of try to highlight, right? But I think before I do that, I think a quick comment, right? I think I completely understand where you're coming from. I think when you're dealing with a traditional setup, right, and when you're wanting to sort of bring them online, right, something that they've not done. Decision makers are typically people who are upwards of say 45, 50, right? Second generation is two to
Exactly.
three. I think there's a huge trust deficit, right? And I think the other thing is people tend to, in smaller businesses, in family-run businesses, proprietor businesses, partnership businesses, right? You tend to rely more on yourself than on tech, right? Because
Exactly.
there is a certain commitment, right? And you fear any discontinuity in tech or delivery, right, could lead into a massive loss for them, right? For all the hard work that they put in, right? And that's
Exactly.
not just something. Yeah, I mean, you'll be surprised, right? I was at one point of time, we were working very closely with a startup, right? And this is out of real life experience that we had, right? And we were talking to a founder of a restaurant business, right? And a funded business, fairly large, but of course pre-COVID, right? Post-COVID, they've shrunk. We wanted to implement a loyalty program for them. And to us, and there was a phenomenal solution by one of the founders, who came with a brilliant pedigree. The restaurant owners, his only sort of an argument in the process of not adopting the technology is that, if you don't get funded, right, 6 months in it, you're going to be out of it, right? What's going to happen to my customer? What's going to happen to the loyalty program that I've run with you? What's going to happen to the experience that I want to deliver, right? And I think that inconsistency or the possibility of inconsistency, kind of made him uncertain about the possibility of delivery. And I think that's true, right? When you're dealing with a very traditional environment, I think that's something which is true. Tara, I want to move to the commercial side of what you're doing, right? I want to understand that model a little better. Now, you're positioning yourself as a completely different player, right? you're not positioning yourself as a SaaS, right? While of course, there's possibly one side of your platform that sits on the side of the distributor, one side sits on possibly the retailer. There's a lot of that, right? uh, you're using a lot of data, right? You're using a lot of analytics to do management, right? Fulfillment, so on and so forth, right? And of course, build further layers, right? Like you mentioned earlier in the conversation, right? What's your monetization model, right? Are you playing an arbitrage game? Are you incentivizing yourself on the inefficiency that you're weeding out of the system? Or is there a fixed fee that both the ends have to sort of, bear uh, for them to have you work with them? What's the commercial model here, which is at play?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, you have highlighted a very important point here, right? The acceptance of your business or your value proposition by the traditional people who are actually
Right.
the decision makers. The first point was that, and the second was on the commercial aspect of what's the revenue model. I'll just connect these two things, right? It's very important in our model because that's where the entire success story is coming from. And
Right.
it is also linked to our funding journey, right?
Right.
So Bidano, right, since day one, Ashok is a very, experienced guy in finance operations and all.
Right.
So since day one, we had decided that we are not going to build a VC sexy business,
Right.
right? we are
I like that one.
we
Okay.
are we are here to build a robust business with a
Right.
very strong revenue model, which is going to be self-sustainable after a certain period of time. The
Interesting.
funding that we need is only going to be needed for the expansion or
Right.
innovation,
Right.
right? So our model was very simple. Now to connect the dot with your second question, so we started with a distribution model. So it's currently all together, it's a very hybrid revenue model. We have different products,
Sure.
different revenue streams, right? And different stakeholders subscribing to different revenue streams. But when we started, right, it was the model where we were earning a percentage commissions on every transactions by eliminating the inefficiencies from the existing ecosystem.
Mhm.
So why did distributors agree to work with us? And this question was literally, I mean, you're bang on, right? This question was asked by a lot of top distributors in every city, that
Right.
what is your status? How do you make money? Because
Right.
if, let's say, 6 months down the line, you run out of cash, right? And my business is completely dependent on you for the fulfillment piece, I will lose my credibility, which I've built for last 40
Absolutely.
years,
Right.
right? So I told them very simple thing. I've just opened my books in front of them.
Right.
I told them, sir, मेरा मॉडल एकदम सिंपल है. आप पहले इंडिविजुअली डिलीवरीज मैनेज करते थे, इंडिविजुअली फुलफिलमेंट्स करते थे. एक फार्मेसी है, 10 लोगों से ऑर्डर कर रहा है, 10 डिलीवरी बॉयज उसके पास एंड ऑफ द डे पे आते थे डिलीवरी करने के लिए. दवा बाजार, एवरी सिटी में there is one दवा बाजार from which the supplies are coming, and there is one pharmacy sitting in one cluster who is procuring all the products. So you imagine the inefficiency. There are 10 trips happening from one point to the other point. It is not needed. Bidano is the company which will consolidate all the orders. I will generate the revenue from all 10 different distributors.
Right.
At the bottom line level, you will be saving some cost because I'm bringing in efficiency. Earlier, you used to pay maybe 20 rupees for one delivery. In my case, you will be paying 15 rupees.
Right.
But I will be generating 15 rupees from each and every distributor. So it is going to suffice my first mile, middle mile, and last mile cost. So my unit economics model, I am going to be generating a very handsome margin, right, at CM1 level and at CM2 level, because there is a consolidation effect here. And it's a volume game. It's again a network effect. The more distributors you have, the more consolidation ratio would be, and the more money you'll be making in the transaction. So our revenue model was quite robust as compared to other players who are operating in this space. So distributor, I mean, they are the numbers guy. They are very expert, right? They know वो जानते हैं profitability को. So उन्होंने देखा, उन्होंने बोला यार ये बंदा तो I mean करेगा काम. At that time we were not even funded, right? Earlier when we were starting the business, I told them, sir, ये मैं आपसे इतना ले रहा हूँ, उससे इतना ले रहा हूँ, उससे मेरा खर्चा इतना है, मैं इतना पैसा कमा रहा हूँ. ये क्लियर है. मैं आपका डेटा बेच के पैसा नहीं कमाऊंगा, मैं आपको अंडरकट करके किसी और से आपका डेटा लेके किसी और से माल लेके पैसा नहीं कमाने वाला. That is my very simple straightforward answer to them, and that's how I got their trust. And when I established a credibility, right, I found I mean, me and Ashok, we both found these opportunities where we can again expand the revenue stream. On fintech, we have some again percentage commission model from the NBFCs. On the procurement, we have higher margins because we are also helping them connect with the potential customers and helping pharmacies to discover the better pricing and get the better schemes availability. And also the revenue model is different. Now the entire SaaS platform that we are coming up with, right, is is having at least 8 to 10 different revenue streams. So it's going to be a very robust ecosystem that we are trying to build here. So, but yeah, at the core of it, right, we have a very strong revenue model and the unit economics model, which is going to be self-sustainable after a couple of years. We have been rejected by a lot of VCs, right, in the process, because everybody was saying, man, you're going to be generating profit after 2 years. Why do you need funding? Will you be able to raise the external funding? कि तू मुझे dividend देने वाला है या IPO में exit देने वाला है, right? So these type of questions we had, but yeah, interesting. But you know, I'm excited.
I'll come to that one, Tala, right? And I'm going to come to. I have a specific question on that one, right? But before I do that, right? Are you becoming a NetMeds for the B2B trade, right? Is that a fair understanding, right? Are you becoming a NetMeds for? Is there an aspiration like that, right? That you become the primary channel of of interaction, right? Nobody needs to know who the distributor is, right? At the end of the day, you have that piece sorted, right? And then you're sitting before the pharmacist, right? Is there an aspiration like that where you want to become a NetMeds?
Let me give you a teaser here, right?
Sure.
What? So we are what is the vision? I mean, where you will see Bidano.
Sure.
So you will be calling Bidano as Apple of maybe a technology ecosystem, right? So similarly, Bidano is going to be an ecosystem which will be having its root so deep into the every channel or every stakeholder that any company or any stakeholder who wants to do anything in this space can get services of Bidano. And we are trying to optimize the processes to a level where the efficiency, which is currently at less than 20%, when I'm talking about the entire end-to-end supply chain, 20-30% max it would be. So we will be with our platform, right? We will be taking this efficiency up from 30% to 80 to 90%. In terms of the wallet share, right? We are planning to cater to more than 80% of the pharmacy wallet share.
Right.
If you want to open a pharmacy shop with just one click in Bidano, the pharmacy shop will be like.
Interesting.
So all the licenses, so this is just a teaser that I'm trying to give you. So you imagine like it's going to be a Play Store, like what Google App Store is. If anybody wants to build an app, they have to list it on the Play Store. So we are trying to make an ecosystem which is going to be having such deep roots into the entire healthcare supply chain that anybody wants to interact with this ecosystem will have to go some way or the other through Bidano.
That's an interesting point that you had. I have a counter. I have a question, right, on that one, but I'm just going to come to that, right? But Tala, like resistance, right? I think when you talk of a traditional ecosystem, right, and here we talk about a pharma ecosystem, right? It's usually an ecosystem which is with high expectations, right? I mean, there are people who adopt to it, and then of course, they're not necessarily satisfied because they, like I said, right, there is a certain trust issue, there's a certain adoption issue, right? And then of course there's a drop out that happens, right? What's been your churn, right? I mean, at Bidano, right? When you built it, right? What's been the churn, right? What's the kind of dropouts that you've seen on both sides, right? On the distributor side, on the pharmacy side, have you seen that, or have you been able to sort of maintain a very healthy retention, right? And the wallet share is consistently increased, right? Tell me a little more about that.
No, so I mean, there has been some churn, of course, right? Like every other startup, because identifying the product market fit, right, is very difficult for any company, because what founders do, I mean, even we made the same mistake, right? We actually fell in love with our idea and the solution. When we actually launched it to a few early adopters, most of them have given us the positive response. So again, it's strengthened our love or the compassion towards our idea. So we have been a bit skeptical in switching the product, or maybe updating or evolving the product to the needs of the larger audience. So when we launched the product, right, it was launched to the entire distribution network of pharma, all types of distributors. I mean, if you have to have an understanding of how this market works is, so there are like super distributors, there's a sub distributors, then there are some undercutters who are working in a limited geographies and all. But we have launched our platform earlier with every stakeholder in the entire value chain. But overall, like in terms of the volumes that we had, number of distributors and all we had in the initial 6 months was pretty high, because we were not focused, right? What are going to be your what are going to be your potential customers who will be able to support you in the long run, and who will be able to sort of stay with you when the competition comes.
Interesting.
Because there will be a competition if you have a rock solid business model, if you have an attractive business model. I mean, we got a competition in 6 months, right, of our service launch. Even the existing player was there in the market. They have launched a similar service like Bidano, discounted our pricing by 50%. But when it happened, most of the distributors left us and they went to that service. But the distributors who stick to Bidano, were the category A or the super stockist of all the brands. So these super stockists have direct connection with the brands. All the other players are actually buying from the super stockists. So these super stockists, these guys are having an infrastructure to cater to 60 to 70% of the pharmacy population in every city.
Sure.
So they are typically working with 50 to 300 different brands. So it ranges from these many. So from the pharmacy's wallet share, they can cater to 60%, 70%, up to 80% of the pharmacy wallet share.
Right.
So then we got to know, like after 8 to 9 months, we got to know these are the target customers. And now whatever you do, you think about these guys, but at the center of our strategy, we always keep retailers.
Right.
Because retailer is a primary contact, right, of the entire B2B healthcare supply chain. So we want to, in terms of the vision, right, Bidano will be India's largest digital pharmacy network with over 200,000 pharmacies on its platform. So all these traditional brick and mortar shops, right, will be converted into a digital pharmacy or a health center. So that's another teaser from my side for our super app that is coming in February. So
I have a bunch of questions on that one, right? So I'm going to come to, like, I'm going to, as we're talking, right, I think there are many questions that are coming, right? And I think distribution is an extremely complicated play, right? But before I jump onto any of these questions, right, what's been your learning, right? I mean, I'm from so currently when you look at your for example, your client base, right? What is the kind of retention that you're working on, right? And how do you quantify it, right? So for you, what are the key matrices, right? And how do you measure yourself on the key matrices?
See, we have a very small set of metrics that we typically track with, because distributor is not the only customer of our service, right? We have pharmacies, we have hospitals, we have labs, there are various other stakeholders. But when you talk about the distributors, right? So initial 6 months, we had a lot of churn, right? Up to approximately 40%. But that's what happens, right? At the top of the funnel, you have everybody, and then at the bottom, then you get to know who is your real customer. And then those set of customers are still working with Bidano. So if you identify, let's say, a potential customer base that we had initially, those guys are still working with Bidano. But as we came forward in our journey, right, over the span of last 18-20 months, as we grew to multiple cities, had large scales, and launched innovative technology platforms, so there was also some churn because of adoptability on the platform. Right. There were few distributors who you can call them as our potential customer, but they were skeptical on using the entire tech that we were offering to them. And it was not good for our business, because as you understand, distribution is a very complex model. Right. There are if you are not having a fully integrated tech, then there would be a lot of losses. There are chances of missing out the important goods, because it's a medicine, right? It's a very critical thing. You need to follow a lot of regulations. There are insulin, there are injectables, there are a lot of these products which needs to be traveled or transported in a temperature controlled environment. If you don't have a fully integrated tech, and distributors using your tech platform to integrate their internal system with us, if they are skeptical on those pieces, so we have to sort of let them go, right? So we had sort of moved on from this phase where we had literally dropped 10 to 15 different distributors who are actually giving us a lot of business. But we had to take this decision, because going forward, if we have to scale, right, we need to be having 100% tech integration with all the stakeholders. So these were the major reasons because of which. But now after COVID, right, most of the stakeholders have identified or understood the importance of technology and importance of efficient model or a scalable model into their own businesses. So now the people are easy to sort of convince that with tech you can do so much with so little. So that's an easy piece. But yes, in tier 2, tier 3 cities, it's becoming difficult. But yeah, our technology team is doing a phenomenal job in simplifying the overall platform to their level, where the user experience will be so easy that they would be comfortable dealing with it.
Interesting. Tala, there's something that you mentioned about, not being a VC sexy business, right? I'd love to understand your experience with VCs. I mean, you've raised some capital, right? How's that experience been, right? How's that journey been?
Initially it
I'd
was,
love to understand that.
yeah. Initially it was tough because, as I told you, right, we did not have a fair understanding of
Right.
how the startups work, right,
Mhm.
from the idea stage to a growth stage.
Right.
Right, in the process there is going to be a death valley, there is going to be some or the
Right.
other pivots, and you need to understand your TAM, you need to understand your competitive positioning. I'm not an MBA, Ashok is not an MBA. So it was difficult, but we were fortunate enough to identify right people in the process and have them on board without thinking about anything else. Because, and we were not greedy, because ultimately, right, we didn't start Bidano
Right.
for some monetary benefit, so we never think about valuation and other stuff, right?
Right.
What we think about is always adding value to the people, right, at the end of the day, with whatever we do. If suppose investors are joining us, so how can we add value to their portfolio network and all?
Right.
So that's what has always been the goal. So
Mhm.
initially when we were raising our first round, this was early 2019, right?
Right.
March, April 2019. So
Mhm.
we started sending out cold emails because we did not have any investor
Right.
network,
Right.
right? So
Right.
Ashok was in US at that time for the business
Right.
trip, so he used to just shortlist some profiles. Some people used to just search angel investors in India, and
Right.
he used to just send a profile from angel list, from LinkedIn, from somewhere, and I used to write them
Right.
cold email that we are building this thing, and would you be interested
Right.
in sort of coming on board, right, to help us revolutionize this entire supply chain and all.
Right.
So we got our first investor through LinkedIn, again fortunate enough to sort of do that,
Right.
because we did not have any other channel, right?
Right.
Nobody would be interested in working with us, right? Investment bankers, you talk to them, I mean, we did not have anybody in Connect.
Right.
Very traditional thought process, and like the first experiences and all. But Sachin Oswal was the first investor that we got connected with.
Interesting.
So somehow, I mean, we still don't know, we still ask him, yeah, what did you see when you read my first cold email, and
Right.
when we had a first interaction? So
Uh-huh.
I just wrote an email to him, right, saying that this is what we, Ashok actually found him on angel list, saying
Right.
that he's a angel investor. He does all this syndicate and all on angel list and a
Right.
couple of other channels, and he does all this seed funding stuff and all.
Right.
So he just got on a call. He just gave us 30
Right.
minutes to explain everything. Me and Ashok were explaining. At the end of the call, he told us this: "What the fuck are you guys doing? I mean,
Right.
kya kar rahe ho? You guys are
Uh,
not clear. You are everywhere." And this was like a first pitch that we were giving to the investor in our whole
right.
life. We never experienced it. I started scrolling a lot of pitch videos
Right.
ऑनलाइन यूट्यूब में थोड़ा
Interesting.
इसका देख रहा था, या शार्प टैंक वॉक टैंक देख करके थोड़ा सा सीखा. And I give pitch to the Sachin Oswal, and he was literally pissed off. He was like, यार मेरा आधा घंटा वेस्ट किया इन लोगों ने. But
Right.
somehow he saw something in us.
Right.
And then the next day, right, we just got a message from him and saying that I want to meet you guys.
Right.
I want to meet you. Unfortunately, at that time he was in Pune, so
Right.
and we were also based out of Pune. So we
Right.
just called him in the office, and he spent 2 hours explaining us how this entire process works,
Interesting.
and to get the funding, what are the things that we need to sort of get on track,
Right.
right? What are the things that we need to get in place?
Right.
How to sort of make a pitch deck, right?
Right.
How to convey the message to the investors?
Right.
What are the different terminologies we need to use?
Right.
Right, all these things. What is the unit economics model? What
Right.
is the TAM, right? What is your GTM? What is your competitive positioning, right? All these things. What are the problems? What are the solutions? What are the value props? All these things. He literally took 2 hour session. Me and Ashok were just sitting like a student and listening to him on the whiteboard. He was explaining everything.
Interesting.
And then he had curated the first round for us. I mean, we are still glad, and Sachin is now a board member on Bidano.
Right.
So he had curated the round. He had identified 5 potential angel investors, and
Right.
he told us it was like a game, right? He used to tell us, okay, this is the first reference that I am connecting you with.
Right.
अगर आप वो क्लियर करते हो, if you manage to crack him, I'll give you the other one, जो कि
Right.
थोड़ा सा difficult है convince करने के लिए. If you crack that guy, then I'll give you the third one. If you
Interesting.
crack that guy, I'll give you the... और जब सब हो जाएंगे उसके बाद मैं डालूंगा.
Right. Interesting.
So that's how the first round got curated. He had already committed. He said कि मैं commit करूंगा, but अगर तुमने ये 4 लोगों को लेकर आए,
Right.
then only I'll be sort of,
Very
you know.
interesting. Right.
So that was the first round, and then after that we got micro VC firms, on board, and then at the time of pre-series A, right,
Right.
that was happening recently. So we got a chance to interact with a lot of large VC firms. So we
Right.
have spoken to Tiger Global, we have spoken
Mhm.
to Naspers and a lot of other large
Right.
firms, and we have also spoken to a lot of VC firms in India. So a couple of firms have looked at our business model. I mean,
Right.
they like the pitch, they like the positioning, and they like the team and everything. But
Right.
when we have sent our financial models, when we have shared this thing, so they had a look at the model and they said, "Man, why your burn is so less?" Right?
Right.
I mean, in terms of the traction, right? You look at the revenues at that time.
Right.
I mean, we had revenues which were multiples to a lot of unicorns which were out there,
Right.
right? And at CM1 level, we were profitable in our mature cities,
Right.
right? At CM2 level, we were at break even in Mumbai and a couple of other cities, and they were like, "Man, how your burn could be so less? I mean, why you're
Right.
not spending a lot on branding and all?" And we took a conscious decision to be on a stealth mode or under the radar until we
Right.
release our Series A, because
Right.
the platform that we are going to be launching very soon, it's going to be a revolutionary one, and
Right.
it's very easy for other people to sort of catch hold on it because they have access to a larger capital. So we wanted to be under the radar, so we didn't spend a
Right.
lot of money on branding and other stuff. But
Right.
these guys told us, I mean, one of them literally told us. So the word VC sexy business is coming from them, right?
Right.
So they told us, your business is not a VC sexy business.
Right.
Your business is rock solid, man. You're gonna be making profit in 2-3 years, and profits are going to be huge because
Right.
your scale would be that much. But VC sexy business में होता है ना कि यार you're burning bloody
Yeah.
$100 million every month, and
Yeah.
all those
I'm actually this close to titling this interaction as creating a VC sexy business, right? Or not creating a VC sexy business, right?
Yeah,
That's
so
an interesting
अरे
one.
यार वो that time me and Ashok were literally, so I mean we literally went into a depression mode
I know. I know.
saying
I
कि
know.
यार VC sexy business, sorry about the language,
Right.
VC sexy business क्या होता है? I mean
Right.
क्या करे, business को sexy कैसे बनाया जाता है?
Yeah. I
So
know.
then at that time we had advisors like Sachin and Kushal Bhagia from
Right.
First Check, and all these guys were already on board. So
Right.
we had a word with them, and Kushal told me very very interesting thing, and that's what I mean I believed in, and that's how we moved on. Kushal told us कि यार ये जो investors होते हैं, I mean these VCs, in fact he himself is a VC. So he
Right.
said, I mean we have this core belief that we try to find a reason not to invest.
Right.
Because the startup is a very risky proposition, right?
Right.
So even if we find out one reason because of which our conviction is not built, right, we don't invest. उनकी 10 checklist है, 25 pointer checklist है, 24 check हो रहा है, एक भी check नहीं हुआ तो they don't invest. But he told me one thing very simple. There are startups out there in the market which are really very successful, and they were also not VC sexy. Talk about Postman.
Right.
Nobody thought Udaan would be a unicorn in less than a year timeline.
Right.
It was not a VC sexy. It was a core distribution platform, B2B distributor platform. Right. There are a lot of companies, and like Postman, like you talk about Airbnb and all these companies. Like in their early days, they were also not VC sexies. Right. So he told me this thing, that you need only one investor to say yes in every round.
Right.
But investors will have to fund 60 companies in 1 year.
Correct.
So it's a buyer's market.
Interesting.
It's startups market. It's not a VC market.
In interest of time, we're going to quickly move towards my second last question, right, for the session today, right?
Yes.
What are the next 2 years like, right? I mean, there is a lot which is happening in healthcare, in pharma, in distribution, right? What you've established is, and I think it's possibly a difficult choice. Right? It's a difficult stack that you're sitting on, right? Are we going to see a distribution platform for D2C brands, right? And many healthcare D2C brands are coming up, which is essentially all OTC, right? And a lot of these brands are now looking at physical presence. I think that's is that something that you're going to see? Tata has entered, right? They've acquired 1mg, right? And they're creating, they're actually going to be disrupting with their credibility. They'll now be disrupting a lot of traditional retail, which has been happening, right? Now, do you think, and that's your core market, right? And I think a lot of this movement, right? I think next 2 years, 2.5 years are going to be very interesting. I'd love to hear from you, right? What are the next 2 years like? Very quickly, that are your priority, right? How do you see this market playing out? What are some of the things that you are going to be introducing? I mean, you've spoken about the platform, right? The SaaS platform that you talked about. But what are the numbers that you're going to see you achieve in next 2 years, right? I would have loved to ask you a 5-year question. But I think 5 years is just too cliche right now, right? So I'm gonna stick to your question. What are the
It's a
next 2 years?
quite dynamic landscape, so it would be difficult for me to sort of answer
Right.
what will happen in next 5 years. But yes, in 2 years, I mean the landscape is shifting pretty quickly, right? And there is
Mhm.
a lot of consolidation happening on the
Right.
B2B side, on the B2B side. There are a lot of D2C platforms which are coming up,
Right.
but ultimately it all boils down to how the ecosystem will adopt to it,
Right.
right? And what Bidano, from the Bidano's perspective, if you look at it, right, we are not earlier we were trying to position ourselves as a niche player operating
Right.
in a very specific stake between very specific stakeholders like
Right.
distributors and retailers, having retailers at the center of our strategy. But over the span of last 1.5 year, we have evolved Bidano to become the whole ecosystem itself,
Right.
right? So we are also going to be having brands as our
Mhm.
clients. We are
Right.
going to be having distributors. We are going to be having labs. We are going
Interesting.
to be having hospitals,
Right.
doctors, pharmacies, everybody on the platform.
Right.
So you're sort of de-risking your entire model over the span of next 2 years by decentralizing your revenue streams.
Right.
So with that approach, the platform that we are building, right, is so adaptive and it's so revolutionary that going forward, even if a D2C brand or a company wants to establish their brand, right, they typically invest a couple of $1 million over the span of next 6 to 8 months to sort of
Right.
get to the consumer or maybe across the country. With our platform, we are going to be opening up a channel within a couple of days time. Their product will be there across 1 million pharmacies,
Right.
right? And these pharmacies, I mean, as I told you about the size of the market, right,
Mhm.
no matter how much consolidation happens,
Right.
consolidation will be happening. So we are not saying that pharmacies would not be disrupted or
Right.
distributors would not be disrupted. It is going to happen,
Right.
but this disruption will always leads to the consolidation. So
Right.
there are going to be few major stakeholders which will be
Mhm.
there in the entire ecosystem who will be running the entire show,
Right.
right? And we want to be part of the ecosystem. We don't want to
Interesting.
lead it, of course, because it's very difficult looking at the size of the market. That's why most of these giants, like even you talk about pharmacy and all, they have now bought Thyrocare, and now
Right.
they have bought Acnamed, which is like a hospital supplies company and all. So everybody is trying to find out their niche in the entire ecosystem, and they are trying to expand the boundaries of the ecosystem to increase the TAM. So TAM
Right.
is being increased. So even Bidano, I mean, at the center of our, I mean, business model, what do we think, right? We always think about converting these pharmacies into the health centers,
Right.
right? So expand their revenue streams. So earlier pharmacy was generating maybe a revenue of couple of lakhs on a daily basis.
Right.
Now we want to make that number to 2 lakhs. So on one hand, there is an organic growth of 22% of the market. On the
Right.
other hand, you are pushing the boundaries set by the traditional market practices,
Right.
right? In terms of the overall TAM, you are pushing those boundaries and you're increasing the TAM altogether. And
Interesting.
if you help them increase the TAM, you become the leader of it,
Right.
because you understand the nuances, you understand who are the stakeholders who will be responsible to deliver the services in those lines.
Right.
And Bidano is going to be having its open ends for the
Fantastic.
collaboration. So we are a strategic partner to one of the largest group purchasing organization in India. We
Mhm.
are the partner to All India Chemist Association, because we are also
Right.
trying to regulate the entire market. We are
Mhm.
trying to eliminate the counterfeit drugs from the entire supply chain.
Right.
We are trying to control the expiry medicines percentage for the entire country. it's a
Right.
it's a huge 1.5 to $2 billion problem
Right.
annually,
Mhm.
right? So as Bidano, I mean, we are quite open. We are not looking at anybody as a direct
Right.
competitors or indirect competitors as
Mhm.
of now, because we know the landscape shift is happening quite fast. We
Right.
don't know where the market will end up,
Right.
but the ultimate focus is to digitize these brick and mortar shops, right,
Mhm.
and help them provide better comfort and convenience to the end consumer, because ultimately it all depends on the behavior of the end consumer. how
Right.
do they see as how do they see local pharmacies as? What
Right.
is the comparison between local and online pharmacies? What is the
Right.
comparison between local pharmacy and a organized retail chain? Like
Right.
maybe Reliance is opening up 100,000 pharmacies over the span of next 2 years, right? So what Reliance is going to offer, and whether this pharmacy would be able to offer before Reliance,
Mhm. Right.
right? So how do you stay ahead of competition? How do you out compete the people who are trying to capture the market by different means? So
Interesting.
that's
You know,
what we are
Tala, I think
focusing
I
on.
think I think one thing which is very clear, right, in this conversation is that you're definitely making a lot of players who want to own the consumer, right? by offering variety of things in a super app play, right? And I think everybody's kind of aspiring for essentially that, right? And everybody's kind of tackling it on the consumer side. I think what you're really doing, and possibly what you'll emerge as, is going to be one of the most significant critical impediments, right? Will not necessarily let the traditional system get wiped off very quickly, right?
Exactly.
Which they could be very close to, right? Because the larger organizations, more consolidated, more tightly packed organizations, the way they are prepared, the way they are integrated, the way they are looking at data analytics, right, and the end consumer, I think they're in a
Yeah.
far superior position vis-a-vis these guys, right? And I think what you're doing is essentially saving a lot of these, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's your larger role in the entire scheme of things, right? Uh,
Yeah.
I have
So
a bunch of points on that one. Please go
just
ahead.
a small comment
Yeah,
on this point. I mean, why are we doing this? Right?
right.
That's very important. So, two reasons, as I told you, right?
Sure.
First is that we want to empower these pharmacies and
Hmm.
distributors because the population is huge,
Hmm.
1,100,000 distributors across the country.
Sure.
The second reason is we are focusing on delivering the better quality of healthcare to the end
Right.
consumer.
Right.
When I'm talking about healthcare, it's a whole bunch of things, but I'm talking about specifically about
Right.
the products, right?
Hmm.
Products and services.
Right.
So you can't do it all alone,
Right.
right? We have done a very thorough research on this, and we got to know, looking at the size of the market,
Hmm.
if you will start building it from the scratch,
Right.
right? Start building the network or a distribution network from the scratch.
Sure.
You will need a lot of capital to do
Hmm.
that first thing. In the
Right.
process, you are going to be impacting millions of people and their businesses.
Right.
Third, you will not be efficient enough to provide that quality of comfort and convenience or the access or availability to the end consumers.
Right.
Our focus is the network is already there. You
Hmm.
just need to leverage the existing network.
Right.
So use distributors for the fulfillment, like
Right.
inventories, and there are a lot of other values that distributors add in their value chain.
Right.
Use pharmacies as your primary point of contact to interact with the consumer. They are
Right.
registered pharmacies. They can guide the consumers. You go to US, go to Walgreens or CVS, right? What
Right.
kind of experience you get? Why can't these guys be educated or empowered with the help of technology to provide that level of comfort and convenience? You don't need to build a network. The network is already there. You just need to know how to leverage it.
Right. No, Tala, I think, I
That's
think,
the
I think,
reason.
I think in business, there's nothing right or wrong, right? I mean, that's the way I look at it, right? I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there
Go
are other
ahead.
players who are solving it in a certain way, and you are solving it in a certain way, right?
Yes, of course,
Uh,
of course.
I think one thing which is definitely there, I think, is in the way you're doing it. I think you're doing it. You're putting in a very honest effort. You are actually empowering a lot of these guys, right, to go out and compete, right, and sustain themselves, right. But what you don't control is their intent, right. And I think as
That's
soon as you
true.
start to look at brands, or for example, consolidated players coming up, right, or 360-degree players coming up. Let me put it that way, right. One
Mhm.
MG and a bunch of others, right. Netmeds. I think what they are offering is they control the last mile experience, right? And I think these are
Very
two.
true.
I think at the end of the day, it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out, right? I think, of course, in your model there are certain advantages that you have. In their model, there are certain advantages that they have. Uh, I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, right? I think next 2 years are going to be very, very exciting as far as this is concerned.
Yeah,
Tala, my
yeah,
last question to you in this session, right? And I have many more, but I'm gonna reserve them for our next conversation
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
hopefully soon, right?
Please,
My
please, man.
last
Yeah,
question to you is you built this enterprise, right, with Ashok, single-handedly, right, not necessarily coming from a background in VCs, right. You just wanted to dive into a business and you kind of dove into that business, right, and you built it from where it started to where it is today, right.
it's still early
You've lived
stage, man.
still early stage. You've lived each part of it, right. That makes your general journey very, very interesting, right. Team plays a very critical role. It's an entire scheme of things, right. I want you to and advise a suggestion, right, for many, many founders who are going to be watching this, right. uh, what are some of the things, or say the top 2 or 3 things that you think are very critical when you're building a team, right, that everybody should consider, as when they're wanting to build a large scalable business which is going to operate at many levels across many markets within India and outside.
Yeah. So see, I mean, there are a couple of things. I mean, that's what I mean. I can just relate it with our experiences,
Sure.
our failures, or our learnings, right?
Right.
So initially, I mean, when me and Ashok, we were just the founding members of the team, and we were just starting off.
Right.
The initial 5 people that we got on board,
Right.
right? We had this thing again with Sachin and a lot of other advisors on
Right.
board. I mean, we got this understanding from them. It's
Mhm.
it's very, very critical for you to have the people who are passionate about
Right.
your product or a business, right, or a
Right.
solution that you're trying to add. And I mean, if they're passionate, because see what I have seen over the span of last 4 or 5 years in our journey, startup journey, right, and with,
Right.
like, a lot of setbacks, a lot of pivots, and a lot of
Sure.
learnings, is that the products can be built with
Mhm.
talent, skills, and all, but it can't be executed
Right.
with those things. You need
Right.
to have, in every vertical, you need to have
Right.
one person who is a visionary guy, or
Right.
who is just fueling everybody's
Mhm.
motivation or inspiration to do or like
Right.
whatever they are doing on a daily basis.
Mhm.
So you need to make these things very clear to your early team members
Right.
that, man, we don't know what is going to happen, because
Mhm.
it's a startup altogether. Like 9 out of 10
Right.
startups fail, right? So if you're joining it, right, there is a 90% chance that we are going to fail, but we
Right.
just need to mitigate the risk of failure. And
Absolutely.
this 10% is what would be our belief, and it should be strong enough to sort of, get us going.
Right.
So first is that people should be passionate enough to sort of execute
Mhm.
it well,
Right.
because product development is one piece, right? Sitting in an office on a whiteboard, we can
Sure.
draw fantastic solutions, but when we go out there and actually deliver it to the end customers, right, be ready to sort of, get into some difficult conversations, because
Right.
people literally abuse your first product.
Right.
And 6 months down the line,
Right.
you're gonna be ending up changing the entire platform. But the point is, people who are really clear in terms of their thought process, that they have this entrepreneurial thought process of
Right.
building something from scratch and doing whatever it takes to build it.
Right.
Like that technology is the core of everything, right? So
Right.
that team has to be having this mindset.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I mean, I had guys who used to, get their mattresses in office, and they used to sleep here only when
Right.
the launch timeline is being delayed. So थोड़े ऐसे लोग हम लोग को we need. On the
Right.
business side of it, we need people. First, it's important to get someone from the industry that
Right.
you're currently working in, because
Mhm.
especially founders, they might be coming from the industry, they might not be coming from the industry,
Right.
but we are entrepreneurs, right? We are not subject matter experts all time.
Right.
We are just solution experts. So we need someone from the industry to help us understand different forces which will be impacting the outcome of your execution exercise.
Interesting. Tala,
So all these things, yeah.
I think there is just so much maturity, right? I think for the age that you are, right? I think there's just so much maturity, right? Listen, I think this was a
Still young.
fantastic conversation. There's a fantastic conversation. I think you're still in early days of what you're wanting to
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
achieve, right?
yeah.
I think there's a much longer journey, right? We wish you all the very best, Tala. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
taking the time. I think I love this conversation. I love the energy, right? And the fact that you've been very open, right? I think one thing which kind of stands out in this conversation, right, is that you kind of you've been a very open book, right? You accepted their mistakes, right? You understood what it takes to sort of build a business, right? And committing to faults. But I think the good part is that you actually gone back on the whiteboard and then sketched it
Yeah.
out, re-engaged, right? Re-engineer, and deliver with consistency, right? I think that's something which stands out across this conversation, right? And thank you so much for taking the time out. My sense is,
Thanks,
I think
Ashu.
a lot of what you said, right, in this conversation can actually go on in the playbook of many founders, right? And I
Yeah.
think bringing all of those pieces together is very important. I love particularly the way you are looking at the market, right? You can create a very large business, and compete with the larger players in a very different way, right? And empowerment could completely stand out, right? As a core of what the product and your offering, right? And I think that's something which becomes very clear in the process. Tala, thank you so much for this, right? I loved every bit of this
Thanks a lot,
conversation. I
Ashu.
look forward to
Thanks.
having you with us much sooner. Thank you once again.
Surely. Thanks for having me. Thank you very much.